Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show, we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Flash. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, we're picking up in the aftermath of last episode and trying to figure out whether or not this person that Caitlin is talking to, whether it's really Ronnie or not. She believes it to be Ronnie, and to some extent, it seems like she is right. And obviously, when she meets up with the team later on, because this is her first time, I guess, really getting to see a lot of the victims laid out, because she's not really had much part to do with the investigation until last episode. She was away with Marcus through, I think, a lot of this. But ultimately, she starts recognizing that the victims are people who have some connection to her. Like, some of the people are like people that were in a class of hers. The yoga instructor that died was her yoga instructor. So the entire time, Ronnie's been trying to find her and reach out to her, and that's been through people that she has some connection to. Basically saying, and it's kind of what I thought, basically something happened when he died in the singularity, and he fused with something, and it put him in this uncontrollable state. I thought that was kind of interesting, where basically Caitlin's theory that in the moment he died, like, your brain apparently gets flooded with a certain chemical, and it was basically, like, I guess the same chemical that gets released when you're grieving or whatever. Something of that nature. I'm probably butchering the explanation for it. And now he has this uncontrollable, almost animalistic need to go after grief. So he wants to be saved, and Caitlin's willing to do whatever it takes. Which Barry's like, yeah, maybe we should pump the brakes a little bit. But Caitlin's like, no, like, he's desperate to be saved. And I think, if anything, Barry would understand that, like, if he could go back and change things, he would. He'd want to bring back Ronnie, because there was a part of himself that he blamed himself for a while what happened to Ronnie. Because he saw what it did to Caitlin. It's like, right, I took, because of me, because I rushed into that singularity, there was no other way to stop it, and Ronnie sacrificed himself. I wasn't fast enough, I couldn't do anything. So of course Barry's going to feel some responsibility. If we could bring Ronnie back, that'd be awesome, but he's worried. At first, I mean, understandably, this thing can manipulate you and use your grief against you, so he was worried the same thing might be happening here. But looking at the circumstances, it is stuff that is something that can only come out from a singularity, so it adds validity to their theory. So Barry is just telling Caitlin just to kind of take things slow. And it's not just him. Even Frost is worried too. But at the end of the day, Frost is like, right, me and Caitlin just had our fight. I don't want to get into another fight with her, so I have to have her back this time. We have to have her back this time. And that's also the complicated thing of Frost had her doubt, but because she's trying to do the sisterly thing of, like, right, no matter what, I have to have your back. And even if you're wrong, at the very least, I have to let you figure this out on your own. Because it's like, right, I got to support you and everything, especially after our disagreements last episode. How can I not give you the same latitude that you and the others eventually gave me? So it wants to do the same. And Barry understands that, but it is still like something just doesn't feel right. And especially when Cecile ends up sensing something from it, and she's under the impression, like, right, I felt nothing but anguish inside of her, saying, like, she believes Ronnie wants to die. And it makes you wonder, on some small level, was there ever a Ronnie reaching out to her? Or was it a manipulation to get Cecile to think that, so that the team would turn against Caitlin and force her to kind of double down even more, because she'll feel like she's kind of alone. Yes, Frost has her back, but even then it's like they're kind of alone, because the rest of the team still supports the idea of, like, no, we need to seal this thing away and kind of snuff it out and not help it, because that's how we're actually going to help Ronnie. And I also think it adds this interesting element that even Barry brings up. He's like, he knows better than anyone what it means to be so focused on the past that you're trying to recreate it. The fact is, he's like, I literally created an alternate timeline to save my mom, and I wanted to recreate the past. I wanted everything to be perfect, but the people around me ended up suffering for it. Like, I created a timeline, and even when he tried to come back and fix it, things were wrong. I mean, didn't get into it, but let's not forget, Cisco's brother died because of that. Like, things went and played out differently in his attempt to save his mom, and in an attempt to fix everything, the timeline changed, and Cisco lost his brother, whereas, and things ended up changing. Once again, like, the Frost thing might have been one of those things that's changed, but the understanding had kind of been like, oh, maybe that was always there. It lay dormant. It just never surfaced in the original time. Given enough time, maybe it would have, but still. So Barry understands more so than anyone what it means to want to reclaim the past, but sometimes you have to just let the past go, because you never know what the ramifications could be. Like, he was so caught up in his grief. He understands that better than anyone, but getting so caught up in your grief and what that can do to you. I mean, we saw what it almost did to Chester. And for Caitlin, it's like, right, this is Ronnie. He sacrificed himself. Because she even admits it when she, like, opens up to Marcus, that her relationships have never been the same. So, like, because she never fully got it. Like I brought up, like, there was a whole Hunter Zolomon thing, so that definitely didn't didn't have the most positive effect on your perspective on relationships and stuff. And then, like I said, there was a Julian thing, and then there was really never really, not to my recollection, once again, maybe the whole Ralph situation could have been, it's teetered on that element and route, but she's never had, like, a relationship since Ronnie, just because, like, she could never move past it. And when she did try to move past it, even she admits, like, yeah, didn't have very healthy relationships. So, and it's understandable. This is a situation where you had your future with this person robbed, and you've never been able to let go, but now you have an opportunity to save them. Of course you'd go all in and double down. Despite what Cecile might say, despite what Barry might say, she doesn't want to listen, because she's like, right, if Iris is on, and that's also something Frost was saying, like, if Iris was under these same circumstances, would you go above and beyond to save her? Which, she's kind of in similar straits to some extent next episode, but we'll see. Well, not just next episode, but this episode as well, that how far Barry would go to save her on any occasion. But it's like, right, this does seem a little different, but it's also like, right, like, you can't really, it's hard to argue when that point is made, like, right, despite all that you ever do, and when it comes to you and Iris, the team always kind of has to have your back, but when it comes to us, it's not always, the energy's never we don't keep it, we don't keep the same energy, essentially, is what she's kind of, well, a point that kind of gets driven home. So I think it's a very complicated thing, and even when the rest of the team kind of gets on board with the whole, like I said, saving Ronnie by extinguishing this flame once and for all, Frost decided to have Caitlin's back, and is like, right, if this is what you want to do, because Frost has a perspective that no one else is. They can sympathize. She can literally empathize, because she was even though I was just part of your subconscious back then, I've been by your side. So I was there when you lost Ronnie. You retreated within yourself. You pushed people away. Everyone who loved you, you pushed them away. And it's like, right, it wasn't just that grief and sadness that I felt. It's like, right, but you loved Ronnie so much before he died. And so because of that, Frost wanted to give her this opportunity to do what she needed to. But at the end of the day, no matter how this plays out, you cannot push yourself away from the people who love and care about you. And so ultimately, her and Frost show up, and they resurrect Ronnie. And the moment he's like, oh, thank you, Caitlin, I was like, that is a little weird, considering Cecile was kind of certain that this is what he wanted, because he said, like, set me free, and I almost felt like in that scene when Cecile was communicating with him, it did feel kind of like a oh, set me free, I need to be, I don't want to be in this anguish anymore. So that's what I'm wondering, whether there was some fraction of Ronnie, some spark of who he was still inside of that storm, which kind of reminds me, like, this whole Ronnie situation, it very much kind of reminds me, comparison-wise, it kind of reminds me of the, God, what's his face? The Crooked Man from Raising Dion, if you've seen it, especially with the whole Black Eyes situation. It's like, there's very, like, similar, like, elements there. and comparisons to draw. But either way, Cecile wanted to obviously help, and her powers allowed her to, but she kind of later on thinks, like, oh, did I completely misread this situation? My powers have never really kind of been this off, but that's why I'm curious, what was it that she sensed? Was it really Ronnie, or was it other anguish and grief that she was kind of feeling from this thing being like, right, we want to be set free. We want to be free, or was it just this thing's like, the pain that this thing was in, being stuck in its state, and it's like, right, I don't know, it's hard to say, like, whether its intention was, on some small part, like, no, I want to die because there is a bit of Ronnie in there, or whether there were the other pieces, maybe, of anguish and maybe some people's souls and anguish still kind of live on inside of this storm, and ended up, like, wanting to be set free and let go. Who knows? We'll probably have to wait to find out, but... And now it seems like, oh, everyone was, I guess, Caitlin was right and we were wrong. But at the end of the day, it's like, right, as long as Ronnie's back, he's okay, it's good. But then the reveal at the end that, nah, oh, you're Ronnie? He's dead. He gave his life so that you guys could live, but in his death, I was born. And so it's like, was he always already dead? And, like I was bringing up before, was he still alive to some extent, but now doing this with the splicer and everything ended up giving it power and domain and physical form now that it has a lot more control and it has a full body, whereas like it was just such it was such a wildfire, but now it's a more contained, powerful fire. And he is now Deathstorm, which once again, I brought that up previously. I believe that is his name from Earth 2. The evil version of Firestorm was Deathstorm, which I will, because obviously that version of Deathstorm was just Firestorm, just an evil version of him. I think the colors of his flames were different like this, but holy crap. I like this form. I was like, dude, that looks like something out of Devil May Cry. That design, I was like, that's a pretty sick design. I really, really like that for Deathstorm. I was like, ooh. It kind of reminds, there's probably something specific it kind of reminds me of. It feels like something you see in maybe like I said, Devil May Cry, maybe Darksiders. That seems like that could easily be one of like the writers or something, especially because like, it definitely has like death meets war vibes to it. If you're familiar with those games, you play the Four Horsemen. There's been 3 games in that series so far. You play Death, War, and there is 4. Yeah, I forgot. There is straight up Darksiders 3 because I know there was like Darksiders. What was it? Strikers, where you played Strife, or was Strife 3 and was that Pest? I'm blanking. Regardless, tangents and all that aside. That is the sad aspect of sometimes your heart can lead you astray. That Caitlin's attempt to hold on to him. It was almost interesting, too, because there was a whole Marcus thing, which he was like, yeah, I know what it's like to be dumped. He's like, I mean, granted, a resurrection is kind of a new one, but he had talked about the fact is that, like, the way humans are, that our roots kind of grow up to our hearts, that we kind of have to give them an opportunity to grow. And I guess it almost seemed like he was kind of inferring how Caitlin had kind of cut her heart off for such a long time and didn't kind of let her heart kind of open up and really grow and connect with anyone else. Because even he was like, right, like, if your husband's coming back to life, like, what happens? What does that mean for us? So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, because it's like, right, now that he's Deathstorm, he's probably going to be able to cause a lot more havoc. Like, what he's been able... Because he has been active a lot longer, because they go back and find out, like, even before the most recent 3 victims, there was... Those deaths were happening before him, but I guess they were so under the radar, no one knew about them. And that is the question, because that was a big question Barry was asking. And I'd asked, I think in the previous episode, why now? The whole Ronnie thing happened, once again, 7 years ago, so why now? What changed? Like, maybe it took this long for it to fully be able to manifest in the way that it has been, and it was such a loose thread, obviously feeding on this grief and everything, only got it so far, so it was basically eating a victim at a time, just trying to survive. But now it's like, oh, I'm fully formed now. I don't need to like scrounge for scraps. I can devour on a much larger scale now. So that's interesting. It's also interesting timing too because the episode's called Resurrection. Obviously, Robbie Amell kind of somewhat returning, which is interesting because I still have to watch it. There's so much stuff I put on my back burner. I've just gotten so distracted with other stuff. But Upload Season 2 came out recently, so it's almost befitting and, you know, timing and stuff like that. So I find that fascinating. I was like, oh, the time frame is interesting. I also thought this episode did an interesting thing, too, where it gave us more of Caitlin and Ronnie's relationship. Like, obviously, little tidbits kind of jumping around here, but we never really, because by the time we got introduced to their relationship, she was under the impression Ronnie died, and then finds out, oh, he's actually alive, and he's with Stein and Firestorm. Like, we never got to see a lot of their on-screen relationship. A lot of it happened off-screen. As we saw, it happened 2 years before the whole particle accelerator thing, and obviously, like, when Ronnie did eventually get back control, once they finally understood what was going on with him and could help him out, and, you know, the Firestorm situation became a lot more clear. So it's interesting kind of getting that other side of that in this episode. I thought was interesting. This is the season to bring stuff back, because like we got some more Eddie this season because of the whole Nora and Bart situation. So we got more Eddie because of the past, which I've been waiting for like since season 1's finale of when are they ever going to do something with that Eddie thing? Like that was set up, and it's like I always thought maybe it'd be like a final season thing. Maybe setting all this up. They threw that back in there with that episode in the past. Now this situation, and maybe this kind of lends itself to potentially setting up like the past rearing its head in some shape or form. So we'll have to wait and see whether anything comes about that or not, because I think that was always kind of a running thing of like, will they ever circle back to that? Once again, his body got sucked into like that whole wormhole or whatever, like when he shot himself to stop Eobard and everything. So it's like the quote I heard, I want to say it was like DJ and them from SourceFed Nerve when they were talking about it at the time. It's like, you don't make a body disappear like that. You would have just left it alone unless you had future plans for it, type of situation. So, you know, I've still been waiting to be like, are they gonna drop that at some point in time? And just here we are, season 8, and they still never touched on that again. So, you know, once again, Eddie popping up again like that makes you go, maybe now's the time. Maybe it will be like a final season thing. We'll see. Really quickly, I should also point out something else I thought was kind of an interesting element to this episode is that conversation with Allegra and Chester, where it's like, yeah, he shows off a lot of his experiments, and I think that's an interesting conversation and perspective to have on things. As a scientist, Chester, like everything he works on, he puts it out there because it's like, right, my point is like for my community, I want other people to have access to this technology because science is supposed to be this thing of discovery, and science isn't meant to be this. It's almost like science is a very neutral thing. It can be used for good or evil, but it is just simply about discovery, and the fact is you could do good with it, but that is the complicated thing that, I mean, and I think that applies all across the board a lot of times, especially in the scientific world of something was started off with one purpose and then it gets applied and to have another purpose. Sometimes it could be something bad that can be used for something good, or something good that could be used for something bad, or just in general something that's like just one thing is like could be. It's a weird example to use. It's medicine, but I think the same thing applies. It's just the best example I could give. It's like the whole Viagra situation. Once again, if I remember correctly, Viagra started off as like a heart medication or something like that, and it eventually found other applications. You know, like I said, wild example to use, but I think it's still applicable in this. That applies to science. Like you could have the best of intentions with your discoveries, and it could end up to being something bad. I think the atom bomb is an example of kind of both, isn't it? Like, I think that science itself started off with the best intentions. It had to be used for something bad, but that bad was for the greater good, and that science could be applied to other aspects of science. So it's always that complicated thing. And so that's what Chester wants. He wants science to be a free thing of like, oh yeah, like Wookiee Lover 77 or whatever used these drones to like deliver stuff to like impoverished nations. So it's like, right, there's good that can be done with it. But Allegra is like, right, but who's this? But, you know, Chester's like, right, I don't think supervillains have anything have better things to do than like watch my streams. And he was like, well, maybe worse things to do might be the right appropriate thing to say. And Allegra says the reason why is not that she believes that believes that people are mainly bad, which if you're, you know, I could see someone having that perspective if you're just very pessimistic, you know, and some people be like, that's just, you know, just the human condition of people just being like, yeah, people just generally suck. But Allegra's like, no, my thing is I know most people aren't you. I trust you. I know you have the best of intentions. But it is the same thing of, right, what you're building right now in particular, like you want to share stuff, that's fine, but this is technology that can be used to resurrect someone. And she knows, like, when Esperanza died in my arms, which I'm like, we're throwing all this back out there, and I'm like, is there going to be some correlation there? Maybe the Eddie thing, maybe the Esperanza thing. Obviously, it's just her connecting there of like, right, with this whole conversation about death and just how, obviously, how that parallels this whole Ronnie situation, this episode, and that's kind of the point. People, if they found this technology, they might try to use it to resurrect someone that they care about, and saying that life is meant to be finite. That is also like, it is a horrible thing to say, but I like to believe that life is meant to be finite. But I also like to, you know, recent things maybe, you know, I like to believe that, you know, energy doesn't, you know, like this episode says, like energy doesn't get destroyed, that in some shape or form it's always around us, finding a new form in some, well, shape or form. But it's like the beauty of life being finite makes you appreciate it that much more. It's kind of like a lesson, which is always a complicated lesson to say, considering it's like, yeah, it's easy to say that when people die every day, like way well before they're supposed to, or so it's always a nice romanticized aspect of it, but it's a layered and complicated issue, I feel like, and situation. And you know, I think you're allowed to have layered beliefs about that, and I think that conversation between the two of them was very layered and interesting. So I'm curious to see how that is applicable going forward, what perspective Chester might have going forward when it comes to like his live streaming of some of the technology he has that he works on. So I thought that was pretty dope. But another side of this episode picks up with the whole Tenya thing, where Iris accidentally disappears her mom. And what does she immediately do? She assumes the worst, and Iris is like, oh, you did this to my mom, which I think was short-sighted in the long run. And maybe she has her own plans, but I'm like, isn't that kind of messed up? You're trying to hurt Iris, but it's like, right, you couldn't control your powers, like, so her circumstances are like, you're saying like, oh, she attacked your mom. It's like, no, it was an accident. She's apologetic. Like, all she's ever done is try to help you. And the moment this goes wrong, like, she gave you the benefit of the doubt and she reached out to you. It's just sad that you wouldn't do the same thing for her, you know? Which I thought was kind of sucky. That the moment you got a chance, you immediately, it's like, oh, now you care about someone else. It's like, Iris didn't know her condition would escalate to that point, that she doesn't know what happened to your mom. And that's the thing too, you don't know either. We know that time gets a little wonky around her, so for all we know, she might have gotten displaced in time somewhere, like, because time is literally fracturing around Iris. So it kind of sucks that Tenya did what she did. She can phase through stuff, so I'm assuming Iris isn't dead. Like, I think what she did is she probably like phased. Kind of like how Barry can move so fast, like he almost looks like he's invisible, basically. She might have done that. She might have put Iris in a perpetual state of kind of phasing in and out of like the frequencies of this space. And so now she looks invisible, but maybe she's still there. She just can't interact with anyone or anything because she's kind of like, she probably can see everything, or I don't know. And what kind of effect that's going to have on top of her time sickness and everything too. And Tenya just like walks away, so Barry's going to have to chase down Tenya while also dealing with the aftermath of this Ronnie thing, well, Deathstorm thing too. So there's a lot going on at the moment. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see ultimately where all of this ends up taking us going forward, how this Tenya thing plays out. It is going to be a thing of like, right, two wrongs don't make a right. I'm sorry what happened to your mom, but you shouldn't have done that to my wife. Come on, dude. Especially because if you had given us an opportunity, we could have met up and we could have fixed all of this. She's also ignorant to like who the Flash is and like, right, we're a hero, we're heroes, we saved the day. So I need you to bring Iris back, and maybe she might not be able to, but that also correlates with the whole thing of like, yeah, you have a tendency to kind of go wild for the people you care about, in the sense that, yeah, once again, the conversation has been, if the shoe was on the other foot, if this was Iris, how far would you go? And I think we're about to, well, we've seen it time and time again, and I think we're about to see it happen again. Like, how far is he going to go to try and get Iris back? So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all this takes us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.